Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you on this tour of the world's top risks for 2018. I'm Ian Bremmer.
And I'm Cliff Kupchin.
And together we're going to be taking you around the world. Our biggest concerns, the things that keep us up in the night, ranked from 10 to 1. Please do set your headphones. Channel 2 for English, Channel 1 for Chinese, and let's get started. 2018 is by far the most dangerous geopolitical risk environment that we have experienced since we started the company some 20 years ago. The markets don't recognize it. They're hitting records on a regular basis. The global economy feels pretty good. But geopolitically, we are in the midst of a deep recession. And unlike the last economic recession, the worst since the Great Depression, this time around geopolitically, countries don't feel like they need to hurry to a fix. Certainly the United States, the one country in the world that could be making a difference to pull us out of geopolitical recession, doesn't feel like it's their problem. The Chinese are responding, but they're creating an alternative model to the extent they can, at least economically. The Europeans are nowhere to be seen. The Russians are only causing problems. And rogue states and actors see all this as an opportunity, some space for them to operate. That's a dangerous 2018. It's one you're going to particularly see when we get to risk number 1. But first, let's start counting down from risk 10.
Our 10th risk is Africa's security. Large countries in Africa have recently shown quite robust investment climates and been relatively immune to the instability that surrounds them. That could well change this year.
You see that with terrorism, Al-Shabaab and ISIS only growing across sub-Saharan Africa. You see it with greater refugee flows that are going to be picking up over the course of 2018. And you see it with greater concerns downside for these economies. This is not the African dream that consulting firms have been talking about for over a decade now. It's actually a much more dangerous environment. Risk number 9 is identity politics in Southern Asia. You know, Southern Asia is a fantastic story economically. We've seen that in India, we've seen it across Southeast Asia, one of the best in the world. But there is an underside to it. You see greater Islamic populism on the part of governments as well as Islamic terror, particularly in Malaysia and Indonesia. We see greater anti-China sentiment playing out in nationalism across this region from populations that are doing particularly well, Chinese expats, but aren't as appreciated by local governments and local populations politically. And then, of course, we also see Hindu nationalism and Indian nationalism coming from Narendra Modi in India. Risk number 8 is the United Kingdom. Part of it, of course, is Brexit, by far the most challenging international negotiation being underway anywhere in the world. And neither the United Kingdom or the Europeans are really in line in terms of what they want. That's only going to cause market uncertainty all year long.
The biggest issue is Northern Ireland. The UK is going to leave the EU, so there's got to be a border somewhere, north, south, or east, west. Any special deal on that border is going to set a precedent that Scotland, even London, the City of London, is going to want to follow. It doesn't work. Moreover, Theresa may not finish her term. The most benign scenario is that another Tory takes over, but that would upset Article 50. The least benign scenario is that there's a new election. Jeremy Corbyn wins.
And I got to tell you, if Corbyn actually becomes prime minister, that's probably worse for the United Kingdom than the Brexit negotiation.
Risk number 7, Protectionism 2.0. Protectionism is taking on an entirely new form. It's not just about tariffs. It's about protecting IP and associated technologies, the key to the future. Moreover, Protectionism 2.0 is politicized. Where the money comes from matters. People don't really want Chinese, Russian investment. They're going to be careful.
It's economic issues that are driving the United States and China farther apart. Some of that will be tariffs, but most of it will be non-tariff measures between the world's 2 largest economies. Protectionism 2.0 is going to come against a backdrop where the United States is not leading the rules of the road in the global economy. Nobody else is either.
Risk number 6 is erosion of institutions. People don't trust bureaucratic, technocratic governance. In the United States, the legitimacy of the media is significantly down. Nobody knows who's telling the truth. Fake news. Elections, legitimacy down. Europe and the United States, turnout down in both.
These institutions are becoming less legitimate, the societies are becoming more polarized, and in 2018, we're going to see that process pick up steam. It's going to make a difference in the ability of the United States, Pax Americana, to lead by example for the rest of the world. Risk number 5 is U.S.-Iran relations. I think it's safe to say that neither the Americans nor the Iranians are happy with each other at this point, despite this nuclear deal. President Trump, to start with, is going to do everything possible to pick on Iran on the non-nuclear side. That means in terms of support for anti-U.S. and anti-U.S. ally proxies across the region, support for terrorism, as well as picking up economic sanctions, diplomatic efforts, and military efforts by the United States to check Iranian geopolitical power. It's been on the rise across the region.
Trump also, and it's very important to understand, he can get up in the morning and he can just end the deal any day. If this deal goes down, sanctions will get slapped back on, and the Iranian nuclear program could very well start back up again. This time next year, we could well be talking about Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. That's a bad movie, and we've all seen it. Our 4th risk is Mexico. NAFTA. The negotiation could fall apart. Might not work. Trump could initiate withdrawal, and that would stop negotiations, at least temporarily, creating tremendous uncertainty over billions of dollars of trade, and especially hurting the Mexican economy, which is very dependent on its trade with the United States.
And you really don't want all that happening in an election year. It's going to politicize, create a great sense of anti-Americanism, and the person who's most likely to play it well, that's Lopez Obrador. In charge of his Morena party, he and what will certainly be a much more anti-U.S. cabinet will create massive uncertainty for the economic environment of America's southern neighbor. Risk number 3 is the global tech Cold War. What we have is the most important global sector being an object of great contention between the world's 2 most important economies, the U.S. and China. It's a fight over big data, it's a fight over information, and it's a fight increasingly over the attempt to dominate artificial intelligence. In China, it's the government pouring cash in with companies aligned and patriotic. In the case of the United States, more advanced, but also much less aligned. And these companies are not patriotic. They're increasingly fighting against each other, and they're certainly not playing nice with Washington.
Our number 2 risk is accidents. There's no global policeman, and the wood is dry in a lot of arenas around the world. Take cyber. Lots of state and non-state actors have tremendous cyber capability. We could be facing a year when there's a cyber takedown of a large part of a major economy. Second, Syria. It's a country where countries that don't like each other have a lot of hardware in close proximity. The United States and Russia, the United States and Iran. Something could well go wrong.
North Korea. Not that we're expecting a war, but it's certainly more likely than it has been. The idea that the Americans are telling the North Koreans, fire and fury, you guys can't develop an ICBM, and they're saying, oh yeah, watch us. Certainly greater danger around that. Terrorism. Hitting Americans outside the United States or even back at home. The overreaction from the Trump administration would be extravagant. We haven't had a major geopolitical accident since the Cuban Missile Crisis decades ago. 2018 feels like a time when our luck may be running out. And our number 1 risk for 2018 is China loves a vacuum. For decades now, it's the Americans that have told other countries in the world how to reform. The Russians after Soviet collapse, the East Europeans, emerging markets, yes, even the Chinese. But today, in 2018, you could argue that the American political system is in greater need of structural reform than that of Xi Jinping's China. Xi's the strongest leader that China's had since Mao Zedong. He has consolidated power domestically, and he's prepared to play an increasingly global leadership role at a time when the Americans will not and cannot lead by example. The geopolitical vacuum doesn't get filled, but it becomes much more antagonistic and confrontational because of the rise of China.
Especially in U.S.-China. China's not going to play on North Korea. Trade tensions are going to break out. So the U.S.-China relationship is going to be very tricky. There is, for the very first time, an alternative to the Western model of liberal democracy. It's Xi Jinping, it's China. And that's our top risk for 2018.